All right, here we go. So these two units, these are both Certificate 4, sometimes also diploma level units. But certainly these are units that I think are worth covering, not just for the Certificate 4 students, but also because we do sort of have a bit more information in these units about taking photographs. And for most people, regardless of whether or not you are using photography as like a separate medium, it does sort of require, like every single unit that you do, does require you to take photographs of your images. Something that we always say in your units of competency is you need to upload a clear photo of your work. And so understanding how to take a clear photo is important for your assessments. But it's also just important generally for you going forwards in your own artistic practice that you can take decent photographs of your work. It allows you to post those works on things like social media or your own websites. People will ask for photographs, especially if they're wanting to purchase work. There's lots and lots of different reasons, even just documenting your own work for your own records. So something that has happened to lots of artists that I know, including myself, is that you might sell a work or, after a few years, exhibit a work. And the more works that you produce, it can become easy to kind of forget how many works you've done and what the works are and where they are. So taking photographs, keeping a record, even just having some kind of filing system to make sure that you do have some idea of the works that you've produced, especially if they are works that you want to sell or you want to use to advertise yourself as an artist, etc. It's really important that you are in the practice and in the habit of photographing your works. So we will run through what's required for this unit of competency for those of you who do have it, which, as I say, will be the Certificate 4 students primarily. But there's also plenty of information that just relates to documenting your work and taking photographic images generally, which is, as I say, very important, no matter where you are in your artistic practice. So looking at some of the requirements here, the first requirement for this unit is to document 2 different creative works from beginning to end in your visual arts process diary. That's for document the creative work progress. And then for capture photographic images, it's create and edit professional quality photographs for 2 different creative projects. So capture photographic images does also involve editing photographs as well. And so we'll go into like a few programs, including free programs that you can use to do that. Something else that I guess is another reason why you might be taking photographs or you might need to use or manipulate or edit photographs would be even for things like marketing materials. So not just for social media images, but also including things like flyers and posters. And that's something that we already started to discuss on Tuesday during the professional practice session, that we need images of people's work to use for flyers and posters for the school to advertise the upcoming exhibition. So there's, as I say, lots and lots of reasons why you might be taking photographs. And so it's good to kind of go over some of those basics, regardless of whether you have this unit or not. All right, so to start off with, element 1, this is in the capture photographic images unit. The first one is prepare to capture images. Obviously, I've preempted myself a little bit here. So essentially, these are some of the reasons that I've already talked about for why we would want to take photographs. I think I've covered probably most of those, but going through them again. So having clear photographs demonstrates your ability and also the details of your work. Being able to take photographs that actually show things like your brushwork, show the colors that you've used, all that sort of thing. That's quite important. It demonstrates a pride in your work, your efforts and professionalism overall. Obviously, it's demonstrating or being able to advertise your skills to employers, selling your artwork. And if you do sell your artwork, as I said, it might be the only evidence or reference that you have of that image. So once an image has been sold and it's been taken by someone, that might be the last time you ever see it. So making sure that you have a good high resolution image of your work may be the only record that you end up having of it. So it's also a very, very good reason to be taking good quality photos. If your work was in any way temporary or time-based, the photographic evidence may become the secondary artwork and only evidence of different stages of the work. So that might be something that some people who are maybe a little bit more experimental with their work might be more concerned with. But we're not just talking about performance art there. Another example would be if you created an artwork in a very traditional way, but you used fugitive pigments, meaning pigments that deteriorate over time, then your artwork, even a very traditional painting, may change over time. If you know that that's the case, it might be deliberately part of the meaning or the purpose of your artwork. It might be sort of part of your artist statement is that it's going to continually change over time. So having a photographic record of how it started and how it's progressing can be very important because it might end up being the only evidence you have of that. And obviously, having high quality images on websites and social media makes your work seem more appealing and more legitimate. And fundamentally, if you wouldn't be convinced to buy or work with someone based on their photographs, if you saw it, your audience or employer would feel the same kind of way. So we want to present things in a very professional and a way that demonstrates that you are adept and capable. So a question that's going to come up pretty frequently, I think, is can smartphones do the job for us? I think it's certainly fair to say that the quality and accessibility to smartphones has increased dramatically over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. We now have, like when I first bought a SLR or DSLR camera, which would have been close to 20 years ago now, maybe not even that long ago, maybe more like 15 years ago. That particular camera, I think, was 15 megapixels. And now your most basic phone, like cheapest basic phone, is going to have more megapixels than that. So it's fair to say that the technology has moved very, very fast, and smartphones are every new generation, they're getting better and better and better. But let's have a little look at things that you can do with smartphones. So the first one we've got here is we'll watch a little video talking about smartphone photojournalism, and then another video talking about conceptual art using smartphones.
Wix. It actually sort of was supposed to make our life more convenient, but it's made it harder. I can see actually in that context, it's another advantage of the iPhone, isn't it? Because it's all in one. Because you put all that back.
I just scroll back a little bit. I think it's starting a bit later.
So think about that. Their cell phone networks were down. Their bullets are whizzing over our heads, and there was a Wi-Fi signal that was made so that I could, if I photographed with my iPhone, right, I was able to put that image up on my blog in the thick of it. Are you carrying more kit or less kit? I think digital world has actually made it much harder. I carry more and I have to buy more. on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
You know, you have to buy digital cameras, you have to buy a computer every few years, you have to get the software, you have to get cards, you have to, I mean, and it sort of was supposed to make our life more convenient, but it's made it harder.
I can see actually in that context, it's another advantage of the iPhone, isn't it?
Because it's all in one.
Because you put all that bag down, you've got the iPhone, and I'm imagining that people are going to be more relaxed with you and an iPhone, maybe
That too.
and more themselves.
I think at one point, yes, but now I feel like the cat is out of the bag. I shoot a lot on the New York City subway, which I find to be a very hard environment to photograph because you get locked into this room basically with people that you don't know. And everyone has their New York face, kind of rush hour, you know, shield face on.
Don't
And-
mess with me.
Exactly. And, you know, you take their picture. So, you know, years ago when
The video is muted.
Floyd Mayweather, the undefeated boxer,
Hang on, sorry, has that fixed it?
and when he came in,
Yes, thank you.
Let me just rewind a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
but you have to make eye contact with them. And now I think the cat's out of the bag. Like so many people take pictures and people know it. Like I've looked at pictures and there's like somebody in the corner of the frame kind of looking at me like they know I'm taking a picture. I think people recognize that people are now shooting constantly. I covered Floyd Mayweather, the undefeated champion boxer, and when he came in to the ring in Las Vegas, every single hand was up holding a phone to take a picture. Like every. People often get discouraged about that, like what that means for photography. All those people were taking pictures, and I like to think that I make pictures. And that's a big, big difference.
You talked about the Hipstamatic app, and you've been quite the proponent. You've actually worked with them to develop a specific filter.
Yeah.
What does that do?
Nothing actually. It was developed the photojournalism pack and what became the Lowy lens. It was sort of developed to quiet the purists down. Like this idea that okay, you know, they're crazy, all these filters that might change things. So what I want to do is just have something that sharpened the image, that gave it a little contrast, and that was it. So like pretty much exactly what I do with all my images. Because sometimes the images out of the phone itself are not sharp, because of you know the glass element in the front of an iPhone is so close to the chip. It's just about light.
But it means that if I get it, I can take a photo that's more like something you'd take than I'd have any other chance of doing.
No, I'll let you think that.
I think you went to Iraq when you were 23,
Mhm.
which is very young, and you've done some amazing work there. But there has been personal consequences, hasn't there?
I've been injured. I mean, that's what I just finally got my last piece of.
You've had metal in that arm, or
It was actually a piece of plastic that was never noticed because it was plastic, right now, and it was cutting through my ulnar nerve. I lost my long thoracic nerve in my back. Most of the muscle systems in my back failed a couple of years ago because of that. And, you know, so I've had a lot of injuries from beatings and bombings in Iraq and other places. But I'd probably say that those pale in comparison.
I think that's most of what it's obviously it's a very interesting interview. You can keep watching that, but that's probably the biggest area where he's talking about photojournalism using smartphone technology. And I thought it was quite interesting him talking about how hyper aware people are now as well. And keeping in mind that this interview was from, a few years ago, 11 years ago now. So things have only progressed since then. But I think that, you know, if we look at sort of what he was talking about, the photojournalism using using a smartphone, the accessibility of that, and the fact that it is a form of equipment that's really easy, quick, accessible. You know, everyone has one in their pocket. versus all of the kind of kit and gear to do professional photography that you might otherwise have to buy. And it's certainly really ubiquitous. And as you said, people are so aware of it now that trying to take a photograph of someone in a candid kind of way, I think, has become increasingly difficult. In terms of how does that affect us as artists, obviously this particular unit that we're talking about here is about taking photographs of your own work, but it's also thinking about taking reference photographs. So for yourselves, setting up your own reference photographs is that's the only way that you're going to really completely guarantee that you have, 100% copyright of the images that you're creating. But it certainly comes with its own complications, being able to set up a good image, being able to create a good composition. And if you are trying to capture something candid, then finding a way to not impose yourself into into a situation in such a way that draws attention to you and then makes people aware that you're there, I think is more and more difficult in this day and age. We'll have a look at this video here, and then we're going to talk about like have a bit of a conversation about some of the differences, usefulness, and not of different types of cameras.
I don't see the world in a literal way. So for me to take a photograph of something that I can already see seemed very uninteresting. You don't want to be able to just look at the image and get it. You know, you want to have to look at that image and really wonder, like, what are they saying, or how did they do that? It's really the opposite of traditional photography. It's the opposite of conceptual photography. Every image isn't meant to be some profound insight, but often it does give me insight. I came here to Santa Fe in 1999, took my first Photoshop class, and it opened Pandora's box for me. When I learned how to blend and use layers, it suddenly started creating these magical images that was perfect for me. And I started compositing on the iPhone because of the convenience, and it was cool. Hipstamatic was awesome. And I had to train myself in a different way of placement and thinking, and it was just a natural progression for me. And now that's all I use. That trained me to be free. It trained me to realize that there were no mistakes, that you couldn't undo and change your mind. And really learning how to be free in my art was paramount to also being free in what I chose to express. I wanted to present the world in layers. And it was art therapy really for me. So I was creating work that was meaningful to me and that would tell stories. I wanted it to represent all the influences that would come to me throughout the day, every day. Some of those get registered, some of them don't get registered. And so when I would work and I would let the work appear, it was expressing some of those influences for me. Without it being too cliche, it becomes a metaphor for life, of allowing your life to happen. So it is a form of meditation, I think. The iPhone movement is so global. And when it first started, everybody got together through social media. It was kind of this huge movement that just happened like suddenly. I was in a gallery in Paris for 2 years, and Portugal and Spain. I did a show that toured for a whole year, and those opportunities, would not have come about without social media, because that's how we found each other, and that's how we communicated. I still don't think of it as a career. It's just something I do because I love it. I earned a living other ways. I think being at my age, I'm not really looking at a career path. I'm looking to kind of chill and just do what I want to do finally. Having worked since I was 14, I feel like it's okay just to do what you want. And you can do that on the iPhone. You can put together single images and start playing with it in a way that just tweaks it a little bit so that it's a little off. I have 10,000 images on my phone, and God knows you don't need 10,000 images on your phone to shoot from. I can't even contain all my ideas. I just go through the day, I see things, and I constantly have ideas about things to create. And it isn't until I actually sit down, whatever happens to be in my consciousness at the moment is what I start working on. And if I get stuck, sometimes I back myself right to a corner with a piece, but that process is crucial to, the next step. So nothing's ever wasted. Through these blending modes and pulling up images, things happen on the phone that are unpredictable. And it's important to be paying attention all the while, and you capture that, put it aside, and you keep going. And so you actually are letting that image evolve in front of you. It's evolving here. So you're not getting your left brain involved. You're doing your best not to get your left brain involved. And hopefully you're just using your gut and just choosing something and putting it there and being very, very playful. That's the key, is being very playful and allowing the image to unfold before you.
Still playing, is it? No. Good. So thinking about the differences between different types of cameras. So properties.
Video, we're going to follow along with restoration of an icon.
Nope. Thinking about different kinds of properties in different types of cameras, like smartphones, disposable cameras, more traditional, digital cameras or traditional film cameras. What would be some, pros, some cons that we can think of for those different types of things? What we will do is coming over here to our actual workbook. If we have a look here, we've got smartphone versus the camera industry, and features and kind of characteristics of a smartphone versus, say, a digital camera, DSLR, and whether those are important, whether those are something that you care about, but making kind of comparisons between these different tools, essentially. So first off, looking at a smartphone, in terms of convenience, for example, smartphone is very strong. A DSLR camera, a digital camera, is weaker in terms of convenience. Is that important to you? Yes or no? Obviously, we'd like you to give, in answering these questions, give a little bit more detail about why it's important to you. But we can go through a few of these. So, smartphone camera for recording videos. Strong, medium, or weak? What do we think? And you can kind of give a rating for both. So you could say smartphone camera, whatever you feel like it is, and then digital camera is X, whatever you think it is. You can pop your answers in the chats. I've got 6 people logged in. Is anyone actually here and listening at the moment?
Yes, Krista.
Okay. So give me an answer then, Bhavani. What do you think? Smartphone camera for recording videos, strong, medium, weak versus digital camera?
I prefer a digital camera to record the videos more than a smartphone because the pixel value is sometimes is granular, and also if sometimes yeah, I prefer digital camera because I see the quality of the videos is much better than a smartphone.
Yeah, good. So, and Lucinda said weaker on the phone, especially if you're filming from further away.
Yeah.
So I think that's fair to say, is that a digital camera will give you better or higher resolution, probably better quality. So we'd say maybe digital camera is strong, smartphone camera medium or weak, and then you can make a decision for yourself about how important that is. I think, Bhavani, you said it's maybe quite important to you, would you say, or not important?
It's important for me to record a video from a digital camera, so it's not granular.
Yeah, good. All right, let's go through a couple more. So what about control of settings? Comparing the two to each other, smartphone versus digital camera. Sophie, what about you? Can you give me an answer on that one? Oops, Sophie's was occupied. Lucinda, how about you? So Lucinda said, I haven't used a digital camera to take photos in a long time, but I'm sure it's still good if they're still being used. Yeah, so I'd say if we're looking at the control of settings that you might be able to, like how much you can control the settings, how much you can change things, probably the digital camera gives you more options. If we look at the next one though, ease of use. Sophie said digital cameras are very different in quality. Most aren't the best. So most, do you mean most digital cameras or most smartphones? Like you're saying, there's a lot of cheap digital smartphones on the, digital cameras on the market.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say as well. If we were, so we'll just mention ease of use, just answering that questions. So Sophie said smartphone cameras nowadays surpass cameras. Yeah, there's and that's sort of what I was mentioning before when I've bought years ago, bought a, at the time, quite expensive DSLR camera. And it it has now been absolutely superseded by my smartphone. And mine's not even a particularly high quality smartphone. So I do think, yes, a lot of them have been surpassed, and it seems like it's going to go further and further in that direction. That said, as some of you may know, my mum is a professional photographer, and she sells photographic prints a lot. She absolutely couldn't be using just her smartphone to be selling her digital prints. Yeah, so Lucinda said photographers are always hauling at least one bag of gear for high quality digital cameras. Yeah, in terms of convenience, definitely smartphones win hands down. And I would say if you have a good quality smartphone, these days, if you are using it just for yourself, just to capture reference images for your own works, your own paintings or whatever, then smartphones will probably do just fine. But if you are planning on selling any of your images or wanting to produce high resolution prints, like, as I said, my mum, she produces prints that are like 1 meter by 2 meter, kind of that sort of size. And so she has about $10,000 worth of camera gear that she is lugging around whenever she goes photographing. But that is, as I say, for a very specific kind of purpose. So I would say that it's fair to say that smartphones certainly haven't completely superseded the need for digital cameras in every space, but for a lot of purposes, I think they probably have. All right, so if you do have this unit, you can go through and make your own sort of assessments on the rest of these. And there is, having a look here at this article that's linked through here. This does give us a bit of an overview as well of the differences. This article is also a couple of years old now, so that does mean you know, we're probably due for an update because camera phones have gotten even better since then. But yes, there's putting in those answers, and then you can also give yourself an evaluation in terms of how important it is to you personally. All right. Let's have a little look at the principles and elements of photography. Now, the principles and elements of photography are also the same as the principles and elements of design. Because when we're talking about the principles and elements of photography or design, we're essentially talking about the sort of abstract parts that make up a composition or make up a visual image. So if you know any of the principles and elements of design, then you probably know most of the principles and elements of photography. There are a couple of extra ones though that are more specific to just photography as well. But can anyone give me any of the principles and elements of design if you know them? Have you heard of these before? These will be in other, we would have had these in other assessments, or they would have been described to you by even by your tutors when talking about compositions.
Yeah.
What was that one? Sorry, Bhavani, you just only came in at the end.
The elements of design are color, line, shape, value. Color, line, shape, value, and well, coming to principles of design, it will be a balance, contrast, emphasis, proportions, pattern, gradient. I think in elements we also have texture, space. I'm not remembering. I missed something.
No, that's really good. Yeah, you've absolutely nailed most of them. So the ones that I've got written down here: line, shape, form, texture, pattern, color, space, composition, light. These were the ones that are probably more specific to photography: light, depth of field, and vantage point or perspective. So as I said, they're quite similar to and have some overlap with the elements and principles of design, but there's a couple like depth of field that are more specific to photography. So we've got a link here, which takes us to the elements and principles of design, of photography. And if we have a look, so those are the elements. And if we have a look at the principles of photography, unity, balance, emphasis, proportion, contrast, rhythm, or repetition, and movement. Excellent. So let's have a look at a couple of examples and see what we can see. So these are a couple of examples of composition. So what elements and principles of design can we see in these examples? I'll read them to you again. Line, shape, form, texture, pattern, color, space, composition, light, depth of field, vantage point, or perspective. And then we also have, those are the elements, and then principles, unity or harmony, balance, emphasis, proportion, contrast, rhythm or repetition, and movement. Lucinda said space, pun intended. Yeah, absolutely, there is. That was the first one that I thought of too. We've definitely got space. What else have we got? What else can we see in here?
In example 1, we see a sense of movement and also depth.
Depth, yep. Depth and movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't see the elements being, there's no unity. I don't know, that's how I feel in example 1. Every element is spread very separately, but feels like no relation.
And that's fine. We're not going to see, like, every image is not going to have every element or every principle of design, because if it did, then images would look a lot more uniform than they do. So it's not a matter of saying that it has to have all of them. Every picture has to have all of them. But the more we can kind of get into the habit of identifying these elements and principles, the more we can think about deliberately including them in our own work. So yeah, so that's good. We've given a couple of examples to the first one. What about the second one? I can see a few things in there that catch my eye. I'll give one that's the first one that I can think of, or that caught my eye, is repetition, or repetition. So it seems quite obvious, but we've got two giraffes in very similar pose. That is repetition. We can also say, it's fair to say, anytime we have a subject that has a form, some kind of three-dimensional form, or even just a three-dimensional shape, that would be inclusive of shape and form. There's also pattern on the giraffes. What else? Other potential ones: color, space, light, perspective, unity or harmony, balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, balance.
Perspective. I think there's pretty clear perspective.
Yeah.
You can see into the distance. We've got a horizon line. Things are getting smaller as they go further away. Any others? Lucinda, what do you think? Lucinda said, is use of negative space one? I don't know the proper term. Yeah, I mean, if we talk about space, negative space or positive space, those are both types of space. And certainly saying that there is a clear use of negative space. Absolutely. Absolutely. Good. The next question that I want to ask, though, which doesn't relate to the elements and principles of design, is how do the images make us feel? So looking at the images, let's get a little bit descriptive. What are, if you could reduce it to a couple of words or a sentence or just your general kind of emotional feeling, how does it make you feel? The first image and the second image. Not everyone's going to be the same. There's no right or wrong answer to this. I just want your perspective on how the images make you feel.
For me, example one feels like a goodbye. There's no relation between the elements, so it's more like the the astronomer is just I mean, it's just like indirectly death to me, saying goodbye to Earth. That's how I felt in example one. And for example two, somehow when there's I feel it's still, though on Earth, I feel the image is very still. It is not there. I don't feel any sense of movement when I first saw this image. It felt very still. The life has stuck there. That's all. That's how I felt for the example too.
Good. Yeah. Lucinda said for image one, it makes her feel quiet, small, and alone. Yeah. I think and different people have different perspectives on things and different reactions to things. But I think Bhavani saying it feels like a goodbye, like there feels like there's sort of a disconnection. I would say for me, it feels a bit lonely. It feels a bit like, yeah, lonely, isolated, which I think we're all sort of saying similar things. And then with the second one, Lucinda, how does the second one make you feel? And this is still an open question to anyone who happens to be still watching or listening. It's just Lucinda's actually replying in the chat. Our arrows popped in. So the space one feels a bit peaceful and silent. Yeah, that's nice. And the second one, how does the second one make us feel? Bhavani said it feels quite sort of static. And like it's like still and there's not much movement. Lucinda says, a sense of comfort in community, no threats around. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. I feel like there's a connection there to Bhavani saying it feels still, like it's sort of like a peacefulness. And yeah, as you say, no threats around it. It feels sort of quite comfortable. Arrow, how does the second one make you feel? I think for me, while Arrow's replying, oh, Sophie's popped in. Second image makes me feel happy because the giraffes are cute. Yep, I think that's absolutely fair as well. Arrow said the second image makes her feel angry because she's reminded that she can't draw giraffes. That is a very good response. I think and what's, I guess this is what's interesting too, is when we look at images, we can sometimes find kind of common threads, and what I'm driving at here and what we'll get to is kind of thinking about the way that certain elements of design, certain elements of photography. This isn't a laughing matter. I'm so sorry, Ara. I'm so sorry. There is a certain, or sometimes kind of a common thread that goes through the way that we see things, the way that we feel about things, the way that certain things will make us feel, certain imagery, or emptiness, blankness. So for negative space, which Lucinda mentioned before, the more negative space we have, often the more peaceful or isolated or lonely something will make us feel. I'd say for me, there, with the second image, I can see, yeah, sort of a peacefulness, a stillness to it as well. But it also feels very, very warm, it reminds me of being in Africa and how physically hot it is in Africa. So I feel like for me, there's a sense of that kind of really hot atmosphere that comes from it as well. So there's often a personal component, and which is why I think people do interpret images in different ways, even if we can approach the same image and there will be some commonality in how the majority of people might feel about something. But there's always going to be a personal component to it as well. That might be based on your experiences or your feelings. In the case of Arrow, giraffes being difficult to draw, and that eliciting an emotional response of being angry about it. Whereas for Sophie, it's kind of the opposite. Giraffes are cute, so that makes her feel really happy. So it's very interesting when we are creating artworks, we might think about including certain components and elements, trying to get a specific kind of response from our audience, but we're not always necessarily going to manage that because there's always going to be outliers. And I can give you another example of that too, actually. This is something that happened for me quite recently. This is maybe a bit more generally about creating artworks, not so much just about photographs. But last term, or maybe it was the term before. No, I think it was the term before. I was working on, in my painting class, doing, we were sort of looking at master works, looking at composition. It was a whole term that was just centered around composition. And one of the example images that I showed to the class was this one. This is by an artist that I really like, an artist called Davies. He's an Australian artist who's around at the time of the sort of Heidelberg artists, which is people like Arthur Streeton, Tom Roberts, that sort of period of time. So turn of the last century. And I really love his work. I think it's really atmospheric. I think it's really beautiful. I think he captures a sort of a specific time of day. He did a lot of paintings that were of this kind of time of day. So moonrise paintings, the evening's just closing in, the moon's rising, and it's got sort of an Australian landscape. This is another example of his work as well. So same kind of atmosphere. I think that says 94, so that would be 1894 is when he painted this picture. And like with this one of the things that I love about it particularly is the way that he's created the sky. There's this beautiful kind of layering of the yellows and the oranges into the reds, into the blues, and even the sort of the texture of it, the way that it has this slightly grainy quality really reminds me of that that time of night when the moon starts to come up, that real twilight kind of atmosphere. And I was showing this to my class and talking about this in this kind of way, like saying how much I appreciated it and I loved his techniques and blah, blah, blah. And one of my students said, I absolutely hate this painting, which is really unexpected because I thought it's such an innocuous thing. It's just a, you know, it's just a landscape. It's just a pretty landscape. I can understand you not caring about it or not appreciating it as much as I might, but she flat out hated it. And when I asked why she hated it so much, she said because she grew up in rural Melbourne, or rural Victoria. And she said it reminded her of sort of her childhood, which wasn't particularly a happy childhood. And so it sort of brought back memories of being sad and bored, and I think in some cases, you know, really, really unhappy. And so she had quite an intense reaction to it that was very unexpected. So, you know, as much as I say, we might try and elicit a specific response from our viewers, we have to be conscious that that's not always going to happen. It's not always going to turn out the way that we want. And we do have to be a little bit accepting of that as well. But yeah, does anyone else particularly hate this picture? Quite interested now if it was just her, or whether it's more universally disliked.
No, it's a beautiful painting.
It's a beautiful painting.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's come back to the slideshow here. Oh, boot it out. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna log back in again. All right. So let's take a look at now the exposure triangle. So this is, again, thinking about photographs and photographic images. Even with our cameras that we get on smartphones, if you go into sort of your pro settings, which most smartphones would have now, you can find some specifics. You can find ways to adjust these three kind of elements that form the exposure triangle. So I've got a link that gives us a little bit more sort of specifics talking about the exposure triangle. But essentially, the three elements are the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO. So shutter speed is the length of time that light is allowed in to hit the sensor. And so it's measured in seconds or fractions of a second. Aperture is the size of the circular hole that lets light in to hit the lens. And ISO is the sensitivity of the digital sensor. So higher values of ISO mean that the sensor does not need to collect as much light to make a correct exposure. And low ISO value means that the sensor will have to gather more light to make the exposure. So adjusting any of those will change the exposure of the photograph in slightly different ways. So each adjustment is usually measured as a stop of light on your camera, which is either doubled or halved. So that's very much how it becomes sort of into fractions. So you'll get ISO 100, 200, 400, 800, and so on. Shutter speed will be going 1 or 250ths of a second all the way to 1 second. And then aperture is the width there, so going from 2.8 all the way down to 22. If we adjust any or all of these settings, we're going to get kind of different effects. And your smartphone camera these days, as I say, if you've got pro settings on your smartphone camera, which most of them do, they will often allow you to make adjustments to these three. But in some ways, some of them are now almost being, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like simulated, as opposed to it actually being actually being a physical thing that's happening. So if we think about way back in the day with our more traditional cameras, it used to be like an actual shutter. So like that aperture of the lens would sort of swivel closed and then swivel open again. But these days, our smartphone cameras don't have those physical kind of moving parts. And so even though we use the same language as part of the technology, it's simulating the effects of those sorts of things. But we do still have things like digital sensors, and we do still have megapixels, which tells us how many kind of pixels per inch that you're going to have on your final image. So having a look at overexposure versus underexposure. So out of these two images, which one is overexposed, which one is underexposed?
Is the bright one overexposed?
Yes. So overexposed means that there is too much exposure. And I guess the way to think about that is if you let too much light in, then the picture will be very, very bright to the point of blowing out the details and making it so that you can't, like things start to get lost in how light it is. So that's overexposed. Underexposed means that you haven't allowed enough light in, and so the image will be much, much darker. So the one on the left is underexposed and the one on the right is overexposed. Now, here's a question for you. Let's say we're taking photographs, really quickly on the fly, and you've got some settings that were left over from the last time that you used it, and you're not sure, like you kind of pull your camera out really fast, you take a photograph. Let's say in one situation it's overexposed, in another situation it's underexposed. Is it better for you to have a photograph that is overexposed or underexposed? Do we have any idea?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes. So if you accidentally take a photograph and it is overexposed or underexposed, is it better for it to be overexposed or underexposed?
It depends on the mood I want to capture or the elements I have to. For example, in this case, the underexposure one is actually capturing the beauty of those windows reflecting, and also at the same time, it's I can create a, concept around it. While this shows the bright side of it, and also there's a different concept around it. So I think it depends on what we want to achieve as a photographers and our perspective.
Yes, I agree with all of that, but I am being a little bit more, I'm asking a slightly loaded question, because I'm saying that neither photograph is ideal. So the situation I'm giving you is that you've taken a photograph and there's two scenarios. One of them, the photograph is underexposed, so it's not what you want. And the other one, the photograph is overexposed and it's not what you want. You're going to make adjustments to the photograph to try and get what you actually want. In that case, there is one that is better than the other. Now, Riley has said, I reckon underexposed. Why do you think underexposed would be better than overexposed? And Ari said, I don't think either are ideal. Depends on what you're looking for. Yes, absolutely. So I'm not saying that I'm not saying you need to settle for one or the other. I'm saying if we have photographs and one version is underexposed, one version is overexposed, which one is better to have? Riley said, I feel like it captures more emotion. I'm thinking a little bit more about technical things when I'm asking this question. And I can
Can there
maybe
be a
give you
more balance while, for example, if we are photographing a painting, then I can't have an overexposure or an underexposure because I want to capture the painting as is. Balance is quite important there.
Yes, absolutely. But let's say you've accidentally taken two photographs. One is overexposed, one is underexposed. And it's by accident. You can't take another photograph. Out of those two, is one of them going to be more useful than the other?
Oh,
That's
the
what I'm asking.
overexposed one.
Okay. Why do you think the overexposed one would be better?
I'm just going by these two images here because so a lot of elements are missing in the underexposed one. The darks are quite dark and it's not clear. But even if it's overexposed one, I see all the elements more clearly. So I would still prefer to go with an overexposed one.
Okay. So I will give you an answer now. The answer is underexposed is better. The reason why underexposed is better is because when a photograph is overexposed, any elements that are getting blown out, that are too light, will be completely lost. With an underexposed photograph, you should be able to adjust it and in such a way that you can improve the exposure, but the underexposed photograph, even though it looks very dark, these elements actually haven't been lost. So this is, as I said, this is a technical thing that I'm talking about. This is like part of the way that cameras capture images. When they capture an image and it's underexposed, all of the elements, all of the details are still in the underexposed image. And you can, by changing the exposure and kind of adjusting the photograph, you can actually bring all those elements back. With an overexposed photograph, you can't. Once the images have been blown out and they're too light, they are gone forever. So yeah, so that's something to sort of have in your mind, is if you are taking photographs, and especially if you're doing it quite fast, it's better to err on the side of it being underexposed rather than it being overexposed. And so I would even say, you know, potentially, and this includes taking photographs of your own work, set your camera to be like a little bit darker than how you want the final image to be, because it will just capture a little bit more detail than if it's sort of set perfectly or even set on the other sort of direction on the side of being overexposed. So that's just something valuable, worthwhile knowing. Obviously, being spot on is absolutely better. Like getting the exposure perfect, getting your focus perfect is obviously the best sort of scenario. But if something were to happen and you ended up with everything being a little bit too dark, it is better for it to be underexposed. All right, cool. So having a think now about photography projects. Let's have a little talk, a little think about what are some projects that you might need to use photography for. So first one which we've already sort of talked about, is documenting and recording your creative process. So that might be something that you need, you might need to use photography skills for. What would be some other reasons why you might want to take photographs, or why you might have a photography project?
To create your own references.
Create your own references. Excellent. It's a very good one. What else? And this can include thinking about photographing your artwork, reasons why you might be photographing your artwork.
Yeah. For creating prints.
Yeah, creating prints.
And
Here's one. These are excellent answers, but they're not on my list. So I haven't revealed them on the list yet. You can add them to a separate list. But this is one that might come up for us, including your images of your work for an exhibition catalogue. So as we get closer to the exhibition, or even when you are having your own exhibitions, having high resolution images of your works so that they can be included in the catalogue, that might be a reason to have a photography project.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, any other things we might use it for? So we've said taking your own reference photographs. That's fantastic one. What was the other one you said, Bhavani? Sorry, I've forgotten.
Sorry, I forgot really.
You said
Yeah.
prints, right? You said taking
prints, yeah.
high resolution
Prints.
images for prints, yeah.
Prints, yes.
Yeah, excellent. What would be some other reasons?
I have recently tried to use it for understanding the effect of life on human skin, light on human skin, to understand how the light passes through the human skin and hair.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I use that.
That's super interesting. And photographs do give us, do sometimes allow us to kind of see that if you get the light hitting it in just the right kind of way. Have I talked to you about this? There's a specific term for that, for the way that light hits and interacts with skin. So three words. They all start with S. No, if you don't know it, it's fine. But you can look it up. Subsurface scattering. That's what it's called.
Subsurface scattering.
Scattering, yes. Subsurface scattering. So what's very interesting about this, and this is now we're going off into a bit of a tangent here, but it's one of my favorite things to think about and talk about and paint, is it's the phenomena that you get where as light hits any kind of semi-translucent surface, which includes skin, the light waves won't just bounce off the surface. They will penetrate the surface at least a little bit. When they penetrate the surface, they will hit the cells that are under your skin, you know, the sort of blood vessels and so on, and the light waves will gain energy from those cells, and they will also scatter, meaning that they kind of ping pong around the place. Then where they re-emerge is not in the same place as they entered, and so where they then re-emerge, they will have picked up energy from the particles underneath the surface of the skin. They may or may not change color, therefore, and so they'll sort of pick up red, yellow, and orange, usually, light wave energy.
Yeah.
And then when that hits our eyes, what it creates is a very thin, warm, or reddish, orangish, yellowish kind of rim that sits between the highlight, the area that's getting direct light, and the shadow. Now, this is a phenomena that artists have been observing for years and years and years, particularly the Impressionist portrait painters, but even well before that, people were definitely observing it and including it in their artworks. When I went to the recent Mucha exhibition, did you go and see that?
No, I didn't have a chance to.
It was very good. Although I will say there were certain images in that I was like, oh yeah, this is a big poster. I've seen this big poster before. So I wasn't necessarily super blown away by it. But what I did really love, my favorite piece in the whole thing, was one of the first images when you first walked in. There was a self-portrait of Mucha, and he had put this subsurface scattering into his portrait, and it looked absolutely phenomenal because it really lit his skin up, and gave it this incredible sort of richness and life. But the term subsurface scattering and a lot of the knowledge and theory about it, interestingly, has come from the digital art space. So if you look up subsurface scattering, what you will primarily find is game designers talking about it, because it's an issue that they've had to sort of create algorithms for, because when they're trying to, trying to program for people walking around in a three-dimensional space and light hitting surfaces and skin and so on, to actually make the skin look as though it's alive, they've had to kind of come up with algorithms of how the, digital light waves come in and how it will hit the surface of the skin or be absorbed and then bounce out. So there's a lot of, it's quite sort of cool that there's a lot of theories about it. There's a lot of discussion about it, but it is primarily coming from digital artists, even though traditional artists have also been observing it for a really long time. Let me just see if I can find, I want to try and find this image so I can show you as well, because it is very cool. But yes, so if you haven't looked it up already, do look up subsurface scattering. You'll find heaps of information about it, and it will help you to think about it and put it into your own artwork as well. Hang on, just found the image. I'm just going to share it with myself. Upload it here. And this isn't just for you, Bhavani, by the way. This is for everybody. You should definitely be looking up subsurface scattering if you're interested in working on things like portraits. There we go. Yeah. So this is the self-portrait. This is Mucha's self-portrait. Obviously my phone camera is not the best at capturing it, but you can see up here, see that really strong orange he's put there, the really strong yellow he's put here, he's put really strong red, really strong orange. So at the edge of everywhere that the light is directly hitting the skin, right at that edge, he's put a really strong pop of saturated pigment. And then the actual shadows themselves are much more sort of towards neutral kind of grey. And yeah, that's someone who was sort of working in the 1900s and observed and understood that that's the way when light hits surface of the skin, what it does, and sort of included it in his pictures. And it wasn't just him, but I thought this was a really nice example. When I saw it, I got very excited. I thought it's such a lovely example of that phenomena. Excellent. All right. So coming back to here, these are some other examples. And we also added to a couple of those. So taking photographs of your work for prints, taking your own reference photographs. Those are both really good and professional creative projects or reasons why you might be taking photographs for yourself. But all these other reasons, which we kind of touched on at the beginning of the class too, all these other reasons are also reasons why you might need to take photographs of your work. Here's an example of someone using different types of photography in a very creative kind of way. So this artist creates photographs using a thermal camera to pick up unique signatures of normally untraceable elements of life. And so this example's a dog with water droplets on its face. And the thermal camera is showing us obviously the difference between areas of heat and areas of cool. And so those spots, those dots being the areas of cool. And in terms of thinking about what this adds to the artist's practice, using a different kind of camera, what do we think? How is that adding to her practice?
I'm doing a similar concept of logic as a limitation. I think that will be very interesting using a different camera to see what our eyes cannot capture, because there's a lot of subjects to explore if we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's as you say, it's a big broad world out there in terms of things that we don't perceive on a day-to-day basis. And being able to find a way to show images or express things that the human eyes don't normally see is, yeah, I think it can be very interesting and quite worthwhile as well. You don't have to share, but have you got a specific thing that you're doing, like along those lines?
On those lines, not exactly, but the concept is logic is a limitation. Not always that what we see or what we perceive with our eyes and with our sense organs is not what is. There's beyond that. It's like the UV light. That's the only limitation we can see, but there are other wavelengths that we cannot capture. Our normal eyes
Yeah.
can. It's the same way. Don't stop yourself at what you see. And sometimes there's a lot to perceive beyond what you know. So give that. Don't think how. I mean, a lot of times I meet people who say this cannot happen because this is the logic, but sometimes you have to see beyond that logic and explore. That's when you learn. If the scientists didn't go beyond the logic what they were seeing, they would have never explored what they have explored now about anything. So
yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think it's and it's something that I do think about pretty frequently, is that like the perceivable, recordable universe in terms of, as human beings, how much we can perceive, how much we can record, how much we can document, is something like 2% of the actual universe. So our ability to, even with sophisticated recording instruments, even with our ability to understand that there are things that we physically can't see, but we can still find ways of, acknowledging, like UV, like radio waves, like radiation generally. We have these other ways to be able to say, well, there are other things out there, even if we can't physically see them, we can't physically record them. But things like dark matter and dark light, those are the areas that they're not, chemicals or particles or waves that we can actually see or record, but we know they're there because we can see their impact on the things that we can see, perceive, and record. And they make up the vast majority of the universe. It's like 98% of the universe. We literally have no idea what it is and no way of recording it or perceiving it or understanding it. So we've got this tiny little pocket of what we can understand and we can perceive, and we can record, and we can interact with. And I think about that a lot. And anytime I do think about what's what's possible, or what's impossible, or what's probable, or what's likely, I do kind of come back to that of going, well, you know, within the pocket of what we can understand and perceive, maybe things are predictable, but then outside of that, gosh, who knows? And
Yeah.
and the, as you say, the job of the scientist is to keep pushing the boundaries and pushing the limits and not being satisfied with saying, no, we've found our answer and there's definitely no question about it, because it's things like that that would have stopped us from, you know, understanding radiation. There's, I could be getting this wrong, but my understanding is that, you know, scientists discovering radiation and radio waves was because they were sort of, you know, working with what's it called? Working with not radars, because that would have come afterwards. Like sound recording, and, you know, trying to get sound recording out of space and kind of going, there's this thing, we keep hearing it, maybe there's something wrong with our equipment, and then eventually realizing, oh no, there is this underlying constant kind of frequency. But up until that point, they didn't know what it was, and they hadn't recorded it because you could only see its impact. You couldn't actually directly, you know, kind of at that point record it or perceive it. So it's fascinating stuff. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And I think trying to work out then how to represent that then becomes a big challenge all of its own, but it's exciting. It's exciting to take on those sorts of challenges, have big thoughts, and then, you know,
Yeah,
represent.
yes, because I can't do an entire body of work because it's quite limited to the number of paintings I can display. So I really have to make it very personal and individual and cut it down to 3 paintings on so that's where a huge topic has to be shrinked into. That's the challenge.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's certainly, if we're talking about doing it for the upcoming exhibition, though, like don't limit yourself in the sense of saying, well, this is the only time I can talk about this
Yeah.
particular topic. You can continue to make works about that
Works.
specific topic and keep exploring it. There's no limitation on you in that way.
Yes.
But yeah, but if you're kind of focusing on, well, I'm going to produce these works for this purpose, then yeah, that does sort of limit you somewhat. But yeah, keep thinking about it, keep exploring it. It's a big topic.
Thank you.
Nice. All right. We're already up to element 2, but the rest of this particular topic does go sort of reasonably fast, because once we kind of get past the specifics of cameras and, you know, photography and so on, then we start to get into the let's do it part of the assessment. So this one is preview and experiment with image capture. So first things first, choosing a camera, and thinking about what might affect your decisions when choosing a camera, and what are some of the elements that might be important for you. We kind of touched on this a little bit with the previous one when we were comparing different kinds of, you know, elements like convenience, ease of use, recording versus taking photographs and so on. But I'd like to hear some personal sort of preferences and personal details on what would affect your decision when choosing a camera, and what are the elements that are important for you. While you're having a think about it, and for those of you who are typing, you can type out an answer. I can give you an example of this. So what might affect my decision when choosing a camera? Up until quite recently, because I've had 2 trips to Ethiopia, to the Omo Valley, to visit some very remote tribes there. And both times that I've gone, I've just used my smartphone to capture reference images because very convenient. I chose an Oppo as my phone because Oppos are not as expensive as like a Samsung or an Apple product, but the camera quality is very high. And so the Oppo cameras do capture really nice crisp images. And also their video capture is very good. They have a sort of inbuilt stabilization system that makes video capture extremely smooth. So both times that I went, I just took my phone camera and I was really happy with that. However, the last trip that I did, I made a decision that actually, sort of following the footsteps of my mum a little bit more directly, I want to buy a much larger, more professional photography rig. And the reason for that is because I would also like to branch out into selling prints. And something sort of thinking along those lines, the reason I'm thinking along those lines, and I was talking to Michael Sims about this as well, is that I've kind of come to the realization that sometimes certain images are better as photographs than they are as paintings, and vice versa. I think there's plenty of images that I am better off changing, adapting, or, you know, in some other ways, kind of personalizing a reference image, one that I've captured, and making that into a painting. But when I went through my photographs on my phone later on, there was several images that I thought, well, this won't make a great painting, but it is an excellent photograph. And so I really was quite disappointed that I hadn't taken a good professional camera with me that I could make prints out of. And because it is such a reasonably kind of rare opportunity to go and visit these really remote tribes, I felt, yeah, quite sort of disappointed. I thought, well, that's a really lost opportunity that I'm not going to be able to recreate again. So before I go back, I'm going back in January. I'm going to buy myself a proper professional camera, which again, I'm talking to my mum about. She's got her kind of recommendations that she's going to give me. And I'll be taking both. So I'll be taking my smartphone and I'll be taking a professional camera, and I'll be capturing images for those two separate purposes. Now, do you have an answer here? So Riley said the quality of the images, and if it's worth the price, would influence the camera that you chose. Yeah. So in terms of the elements, as you say, it's the quality of the images versus the price. I think that that's a very common like set of reasons, and they're kind of reasons that work together, I feel like. As I said, with the Oppo, I bought an Oppo years ago. I was taking really nice reference photographs with that. And then I went to a Samsung thinking sort of that I was like upgrading, and I hated it. I found the quality of the photo, even though supposedly the actual quality of the camera was supposed to be better and higher, I found it just took worse photographs. So I ended up going back to Oppo. And it was exactly as you say, it was the feeling like the amount of money that I spent on the phone was less than what I would spend on an equivalent Apple or Samsung, and yet the quality of the images that I was getting from it were just as high, if not in some cases better, than I would get from either of those. So yeah, those are, I think, super common reasons and very valid reasons. Would there be any other reasons that would affect your decision when choosing cameras? Other things that might be important?
For me, once I put, I don't want to keep upgrading the camera once I buy. Because I feel those are very expensive. One of my friend, once she bought the camera, she had to buy different lenses, and those lenses were very expensive, and it was costing a lot from the pocket. It definitely comes down to price, but yeah, I don't want to keep upgrading it very sooner. I would like to keep it for to use it for a long time, for at least the next 10 years. I would like to keep using the same camera. So that's how to see.
Yeah, and I think that that's a valid reason as well. And I wonder if that's a reason to be kind of using the same, or sorry, if that's a goal, if that's one of the driving motivations, then that might also influence the type of camera that you buy, because you might then say, okay, well, rather than buying the latest DSLR or whatever, you might buy a much more old school kind of traditional film camera, something that hasn't, the technology on it hasn't changed, but it therefore won't change. And I'm not saying that this is what you should do, but it could be, you know, that might be the desire to keep the same technology and keep using it might lead you to then go, okay, well, I'm going to just, you know, keep buying only old vintage cameras and using those cameras to create images, knowing that I can keep using them for, you know, years and years to come. In fact, along those lines, when I was last time I was in Bali, I saw a photography exhibition from a guy who was making tintypes. So this is going like, the technology is like way back. So he's using wet plates and he's using like a really old school camera, turn of the last century kind of old school camera. But he produces sort of one-off plates and he sells them as pieces of fine art. And, you know, good on him. That's certainly a technology that we can use for the next 10 years because it's the same technology that they were using 120 years ago. Even more, maybe 150 years ago at this point. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Let's have a little look then at an example. So this is a slightly, you know, different example to what we've talked about so far. You may or may not have seen these before. So this is a Fujimax Insta-Mini 12 instant camera. We'll have a little look-see at the specifications of it. So $109. It's essentially like a small Polaroid, but it's made by Fuji. Allows you to take bright photos in any time at any place. Shutter speed, flash brightness, and other settings automatically adjust to ambient light. It features a close-up mode that's ideal for distances between 30 to 50 centimeters. Twist the lens to turn on, twist again for close-up mode. Close-up mode is ideal for distances of 30 to 50 centimeters. Use a selfie mirror to line up your shots. Camera comes in a clay white design. So that's an example of a camera we might choose for a specific kind of project. So talking about this particular example, what sort of images would this camera be good for capturing? Has everyone used this kind of camera before?
Yes, with friends, capturing sleepovers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's good for capturing, what would we say, like candid, fun shots?
Fun shots, sleepovers, and then the moments like that. I've never thought of using it professionally. Or maybe in my sketchbook, like when I'm doing a color study and I have to add a reference, it would be nice to put that take a shot of the reference and just put it there so that I understand what color study I've done. Maybe I can use it for that.
If we think about how does the manufacturer recommend you should use this camera? So we had a little bit of a look at the specifications briefly, and there were some recommendations there. What were those? Lucinda, can you give us an answer on this one? Are you still there, Lucinda? No, Riley had to leave. Riley had to go to work. Or Arrow? It's not looking for anything too technical.
Take some bright images, selfies, and capturing some. I think it has a feature to take close shots.
Yes, that was probably one of the main things that was mentioned as close shots. But as Ari said, it can be good for capturing images fast. Yeah. Ari said it, the quality isn't as good as iPhones, but it's fun to use. Yeah, I think that's certainly kind of what we were talking about as well. Yeah, it is. It's like a really nice, very, very candid, very quick way of producing photographs. I think there's also, and we'll go to the next sort of question here, but I think there's also something that's very, very nice about the fact that it's a one-off. You only get one image, you know, and then that image is the only image of just that moment. Which is, yeah, I think that's such a lovely, quite unique and pleasing thing in the world of digital cameras and smartphones. Are there any additional accessories we'll need to use this camera?
Those frames, those photo, what's that called? Those photo cards. You need to keep refilling it.
Yeah, the film.
Yeah, the film.
The
Sorry.
film. Yeah, that's right. No, that's fine. It's yeah. So you need to buy a pack of film to put in there. So if we just got this camera by itself, yes, that wouldn't be enough. And also, how is it powered? Let's have a look. Does it say how it's powered?
Batteries.
Batteries, yeah. So it looks like it comes with batteries, but that would also be an accessory that we'd need is batteries for it. Batteries and film, definitely. How could you experiment with it to achieve different results? So it's all pretty straightforward in terms of it adjusts based on the light. You've only got sort of one option in terms of either taking a distance photograph or taking a close-up photograph, but there must be things that we could do that would help us manipulate things and play around with it. We're not thinking here necessarily about you know, wanting to produce reference photos or wanting to record our work, but what could we do that might allow us to kind of play around with things in terms of what result we get from the images?
Because it's quick automatic flashes, I want to capture the birds in my backyard
Mm-hmm.
because they're quite fast and they're very naughty.
Mm-hmm.
They come, so yeah, they come like a team, and yeah, I want to really capture them quite fast with this. I really want to use it for that.
Yeah, nice. That'd be a lovely use of it. Try and get a really quick photo, quick flash, and then you get one
Quick flash.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. All right. So we're going to move now to element 3. And so it's about making artistic choices which raw images and experiments are successful. So it's reviewing your images once you've captured them. Really what we want to talk about here is that, like, it'll go through when you do the unit, it will talk about specifics of, you know, looking at your images, deciding how and why you should choose a specific image over the other. But we'll go through a couple of things here in terms of, and this can be based on things that you are currently doing or have done in the past. How do you sort your images? Where do you currently store your images? How can you efficiently file images? And how do you rename images? So sorting your images. Does anyone at the moment have a system for sorting images?
I just started the system.
Mhm.
but I don't know how successful I'm going to be. So I often take images which kind of inspire me, especially the skies.
Mhm.
And so I started every time now I take an image, I move it to an album, and from that album, I'm moving it to a hard drive to keep it. But I still keep a copy on my phone because anytime so that I can use it for collage with the different other images from. So I still keep it on my phone and I put them on my hard drive by when and where I have taken that image. Because if I want to mention that in my artist statement tomorrow, I will write it down. And
Mm.
also if when I'm on Facebook in different groups and someone is sharing a photograph of their photography, if I like the image, I immediately message them saying, "Hey, I like your image. Can I use it for my painting?" And if
Mm.
they give me an approval, I capture the screenshot and download the image, and I save it on my phone along with the screenshot. I mean, save it on the folder on my computer and then move it to the hard drive later. Like
Mm.
once in a week, I move all my photos to the hard drive. So I put them on. I say this is the reference screenshot and this is the image that I want to paint. And yeah, in future, if I do their paintings, I will go back and message them saying, "Hey, I painted and I've used your name as a reference here on
Yeah.
my statement." I will give them that acknowledgement. So right now, that is how I'm. And a lot of my self portraits and interesting. If I see, I like light and how it plays. So if I see any photographs that I have taken of my own, which or of any one of my friends, and I see the light acting, and then I put them in a separate folder saying the light. These are the sky related images. These are light playing on the portraits. So I save them separately in different folders so that when I want to collage two or three pieces, like for example, now I'm like trying to collage my image with with a different background and try to work on light and dark. Then I collage all of them and see how that works. So that's how I am right now doing. I'm not sure how successful it's going to be because the reference images from the artists. I'm right now. I even on Instagram when I see them, like I download them. Like I have your Eclipse on my phone right now.
Mhm.
So uh, I download them and I put them as inspiration and the artist's name
Mhm.
so that if I want to go back to the artist and look at the image, then I will just go back and look at their Instagram posts again if they're doing any new works because this Instagram doesn't show up every time they post something.
Mm.
So I make sure that I keep their names and I just go back and see what they're doing. So I
Mhm.
save those on my folder. That's how
Mhm.
right now, for my understanding, that's how I'm doing.
Yeah, that's really good. And Sophie said, I use folders with dates to organize my photos as well. So both of you, very good. Yes. I think having a system and especially developing a system early is a very good thing to do. Because certainly as you kind of develop your professional work, your professional career, it can be easy for those images to kind of get out of control. I think about the best that I've managed over the years is I've got sort of two hard drives, one like a laptop and a computer that I store most of my images on, and also a number of thumb drives. And I managed to do them by year. Occasionally I'll manage to like name a folder based on a specific trip or something that I did, but there's quite a lot that are not well sorted. Yeah, so good. I think the earlier you can develop a system that is efficient. And I really liked what you said there, Bhavani, too, about actually like capturing a screenshot of someone giving you written approval that you can use their image. That's excellent. And that's a really good way to make sure that you are meeting requirements for intellectual property and copyright, because that's always the evidence that you will need is the copyright owner of the image has said in writing that you can use their image free of charge. So good. Do we all know how to rename images if necessary? There's different ways you can do it. Often there's one way that you can do it on your phone and a different way that you can do it on your laptop or desktop. I think it's generally easier to do it on a laptop or desktop, but it's harder to do it on your phone, but it is possible to do it on your phone. Are you going to say something, Bhavani?
I never do it on my phone. I do it on my laptop.
Yeah, me too. Most of the time I won't bother changing unless I really have to, like unless I'm standing next to someone and they say, can you send me this image and can you make sure that it's named blah, blah, blah. Otherwise I almost always do it on my laptop rather than on my phone. Excellent. All right. We're almost at the end, so we'll just have a look. This last 2 slides here is about enhancing images, so making changes and adjustments to your image. There's quite a lot of kind of experimental things that you can do to an image, which when we watched the second video that we watched this morning, with the artist talking about using editing programs and the way that she was sort of, you know, finding inspiration and developing the images as she went. There's lots that you can do, and there's lots of different programs and digital tools that you can use. But even from the perspective of what are some basic things that we can do, we can adjust the saturation, the clarity, the contrast, the brightness and shadows. We can crop things to create the right size for a particular platform. And you can use filters or presets in your posts and photographs for portfolio consistency. But it is important to notice that for, you know, portfolios, or especially when you're posting on things like social media, you probably don't want to use filters because it might misrepresent how your work actually looks in person. So all of those are things that we can do to our photographs, and there are free and paid versions of editing software that you can get for your phone or for your laptop or for your desktop. Couldn't think of the word desktop for a second. For your desktop. Does anyone have any specific software that they like to use? I used to do most of my editing on Photoshop. These days I use Clip Studio for my illustrating, and it also does a decent job of editing photos as well. So if I need to do anything like that, then that's generally what I will use. And on my phone, they will have built-in editing software, but I also have a program that I sometimes use called Photo Editor Polish, which does a pretty decent job too. There's like a paid version of that and there's a free version. The free version just has ads, but it's otherwise pretty fine to use. Anyone else? Anyone else got a nice photo editing tool they might like to recommend? Just having a look at my phone, seeing if there's any others that I use. I think it's just that one. Tried a few over the years. There's Lightroom as well, actually. That's another one, which is associated with Photoshop. So it's by Adobe as well. I think that one's all right. I haven't actually used it in a while. No?
No.
Nope. All right. That does bring us to the end of the tutorial anyway. It is nearly 1 o'clock. So do you have any questions, comments, anything you want to share, anything you need to know, be clarified? now's a good time as any.
When capturing the photographs of the paintings for our websites, and I don't have a camera at the moment, and I'm using my Samsung Galaxy S22. I was told that I have to be careful because there will be a curvature at the end, so I cannot zoom in too much or zoom out too much. So if I put it at a distance and then crop the image later, even if the walls are captured, is it okay?
Yeah, I mean, you're sort of then compromising, I suppose, the amount of pixels in the image. So as you say, if you've got, if like this frame here is the full size of what you're capturing, and you zoom out so that your painting is taking up, like, say, this amount of the space that the phone is filling, then when you crop it in, obviously the amount of pixels that you've got has now been reduced pretty dramatically. But you then reduce the amount of curvature and distortion that you'll get at the sides. So a couple of things that I would maybe also suggest is, if possible, use a tripod with a timer.
Okay.
So set it up, set your camera up on a tripod, positioned. Do leave a bit of a gap around it, certainly, and then set it up on a timer so that your hand, there's no movement from your hand as you're taking the picture. And the other thing, something that I've also done, I mean, I've used a better camera than my phone to do this as well, but if it's a particularly large work, I've taken multiple photographs of sections of the work and then essentially put them together into something like Photoshop, and kind of shifted them around and adjusted them so that I've got the highest level of clarity for each section. But that's pretty involved, and certainly more involved than just taking a picture on your phone. And again, that's probably more something that you would be doing to have like a really high quality version of it. So I think for the moment, for taking photographs for social media, I think that would be the two things that I would suggest is, yeah, as someone else has said, leave a gap so you reduce kind of distortion, and use a tripod with a timer.
Yeah. And but the light, the reflective light, do we have to put something white underneath the painting when actually taking a photograph?
Look, I think a lot of camera phones these days are pretty sensitive and will kind of adjust things. The most important thing is that you want the light to be quite even, and if you can see any shine coming from any direct light, like especially onto an oil painting, then you want to try and minimize that shine. So that would be more, though, I would think, more likely to be happening like in a situation like this, where you're going to have light coming from above. And if it's hitting particularly wet paint or a varnish painting, then you can get that like really high reflection off the surface of it. So then it becomes more about trying to manage the lighting or the position of your picture in such a way that you're not getting that really intense sort of reflection off of it. And that can include physically holding something up to like block a particular light angle. And as you say, you can use reflective surfaces to try and fill in areas as well. So using like a whiteboard or something that will be reflective and will allow some light to bounce in if it's looking particularly dark in a corner. But even using things like ring lights, now they're reasonably cheap these days. You can adjust the color usually on them as well, so you can get it to be more like direct sunlight kind of color as opposed to being too sort of yellowish or too bluish. And they do give you a reasonably kind of even round glow with your camera kind of positioned in the middle of it. But it's often a matter of fiddling with it a little bit and kind of repositioning and just finding that spot where you've got the least kind of reflection and you've got the most consistent lighting on it.
Yeah. And a last question about the if it's a very huge painting and I have to take a photograph, where
Mm.
should my lens focus on? Should it focus on exactly in the middle of the painting, or
Yeah, see, that's where I would say I would try and composite a couple of images together, because you're going to lose clarity somewhere. So if you're sort of, like tapping the focus so that's right in the middle, you might find that you can, when you zoom in, you can really see the individual brush marks right in that middle section. But then as you scroll up, you'll see it'll be lost at top and bottom. So wherever you get the camera to focus, you're going to lose clarity somewhere. So if it's like a really massive picture, then I would think about taking more than one photograph from potentially the same position, but try and get your focus at the top, at the middle, at the bottom, and then as much as possible kind of composite those three images together.
thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions from anybody else? If not, then we will call it a day for today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being involved in the conversation as well. So it wasn't just me and Bhavani talking to each other. Appreciate that. And I will see you next week. So have a good week, everyone. Be productive.
Thank you.